Welcome everyone. Today we have with us Executive Vice President of NSDL and renowned economy expert Mr. Chandrashekhar Tilak, and he will speak and share his views on Indian economy and the current global crisis. The current Chinese slowdown in economy and other issues in Europe and also problems with some of the emerging countries have created a global economic crisis. Sir, how do you think that this will impact the Indian economy?
Right at the outset, first let me tell you that whatever I am going to say here are my personal views and not necessarily the views of the organization for which I work. You had mentioned three specific countries over here, China, then European crisis precipitated by Greece and Indian economy. Right at the outset, we must be very clear. Yes, China has slowed down, but that doesn't mean that China has become a Greece. China has slowed down in comparison to its own economic growth, which it has recorded for last 30 years. In last 30 years, China has recorded a GDP growth on an average per year of more than 9 to 9.5%. It has come down to 7. Yes, market has gone down as far as the stock equities are concerned in China, and index has fallen say by 20 to 22%. But it must be clear that in 2013 end, the Chinese index was 2000, it went up to 5000 and now it is 4000. So if you are comparing to 2000, it has doubled. It has gone down means it has come down from 5000 to 4000. Yes, in a month I know that FII has sold worth $9 billion shares on a Chinese market. It doesn't have that, it certainly would have a short-term impact on Chinese economy, Chinese investment culture. But over here, we must be very clear to ourselves that China hosts and holds a forex reserve of more than $4 trillion. Compared to $4 trillion, 9 billion is nothing, number one. Number two, we must understand that China is such a unique country that its composition of forex is completely different than any other country in the world. Yes, it is dominated by export earnings, but simultaneously may not be in the same quantum, but in a much more frequency, Chinese forex reserve boasts of the remittances received from non-resident Chinese. And nowhere it has been mentioned that those remittances have gone down. And most importantly, the third advantage which China has over any other country is that the yuan is probably the only major currency which is pegged even today. These three circumstances would have an impact in short term, but in medium to long term, let us be very clear that the global superpower tussle is between China and Germany and not between any other country. So we are competing with China. China is not competing with anybody. Contrastingly, Greece is in a totally different consideration. We must understand over here that Chinese economy has not gone down to dogs as Greece has. No one has downgraded the credit rating of China as has been done in case of Brazil. That's why I said in the beginning that China is competing with itself. Compared to its own glorious past, it has notched down, but it's an economic essentiality. No country, no economy can go on recording such a huge growth, because whenever we are seeing a GDP growth, and especially in a country like China, which is dominated by the industrial sector, and that too of a small and medium scale enterprises, it has the impact on its other resources. Not only the finance can be recouped, but when you are depending on metal, when you are depending on energy, you are depending on infrastructure, you will have to give some leeway. There is every likelihood that probably Chinese economy is having that leeway at this juncture. So it would not be correct according to me to say that China's economy has slowed down. Yes, its rate might have gone down, but slowing down and going down is totally different. They are certainly not going down. Exactly reverse is a Greece case. Greece is fighting its own peril. If you ask me, it's a classic case of how not to manage an economy. And it's more because of, not only because of the economic mismanagement of that country's rulers, but probably the perceptions with which the foreign donors looked at Greece, looked at Spain, looked at Portugal, they are also to be equally blamed for it. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has clarified at least 100 times in the last 5 years that you can't decide the interest rate for Greece, Spain and Portugal considering the economic growth rate of Germany just because they happen to be the members of a European Union. because these are two contrasting countries. And Greece economy doesn't have its own independent permanent source of income vis-a-vis China. Greece economy is dominated by pensioners. Greece economy is dominated by the government workforce. More than 54% of Greece workforce is dependent on government. Under such circumstances, when you are going on earning or living on a debt, it was bound to happen. If you look at Europe, to take your question, we'll have to look into these three particular factors. Over a period of time, especially from 1901 to 2015, for a common man, 115 years span may look long, but for any global economy or a national economy, 115 is not that much a longer span. It is a culmination of a cumulative effect of various policies initiated by the then rulers and which has resulted into economy. When you take an economic decision today, probably its impact is felt, is visualized 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line. When Greece economy for last more than 3 decades was staying on the foreign debt, which they were just not able to sustain, this was bound to happen. And what has happened? That America was pumping in the money as far as the European economies were concerned. After 2009, when America started itself realizing that they can't go on sustaining these particular things, these European economies who are from 1901 or from the First World War or the Second World War, when they were feeling more dependent on England, who is now more dependent on America today, virtually they don't neither have some sort of a political will, they don't have the economic power, they don't have a financial discipline. So probably Greece is the result of it. We do have all these shades within our national economy itself. We can compare the modern states or the advanced states to China, advanced states to Germany, but we do have the states like Bihar who can be easily compared to Greece. Not only the historical comparisons can be made, but it is very clear that in today's global economy, only those can survive who have a political will to take a decision beyond the edge, not behind the edge. If you are taking a decision which is behind the edge, Greece is the result. If you are able to take a decision beyond the edge, then Germany and China is the result. And that's why certainly we will have an impact. Because as on date, China is a major exporter of a metal. When we as an economy are trying to revive our GDP growth rate from a particular percent of plus minus 7 to plus minus 9.5, your immediate requirement for these metals would go up. But looking into these, we are dependent on other factors. And we have an advantage to deal with China, not because of a geographical condition by which a transportation cost will be reduced, but as we know, because of the pegged nature of a Chinese currency, I know my import obligation very well. And because of that, vis-a-vis a Chinese yuan, my own currency has not fluctuated to that extent as compared to my currency fluctuations to the other currencies. See, it will be a sterling, it may be a dollar, it may be a pound, or it may be a Deutschmark, number one. Number two, given the geographical proximity and common military interest, contrasting as well as complementary, probably it would be much more easy. So to that extent, there will be an impact. But while seeing whether it is because of Europe, whether it is because of America, whether it is because of China, whether it is because of Greece, whether it is because of Brazil, we must understand that what impact we can have would really depend on what steps we initiate. I can give a simile. Yes, these types of discussions were held were in circulation in our country as well when there was a crisis in 2008 and 2009. But over there, we were able to survive in a much better fashion compared to the many other countries of the world. Because at that point of time, it was realized that to that extent, our national economy is not dependent on a global scenario. Barring our external requirements, we are to great extent a country of a producer who can consume whatever it has produced. And even otherwise, our share in a global trade was never in the excess of more than 3%. These particular factors have certainly undergone certain changes in a period after 2009. We are much more open. Many global investors are interested therein. Basically, what would be required more is to be concentrated as far as our own interests are concerned, whether it is a nation or as an individual.
Sir, the government seems to be on the path of incremental reforms like easing of business, more FDI, some minor PSU divestments, and use of technology to stop leakage in passing on of subsidies. While big ticket reforms like GST and land acquisition bill seems to have been stalled. Do you think that the measures taken so far are enough to stimulate high growth in the Indian economy?
Whatever steps government has initiated are in a right direction. And after having a liberalization policy in existence for more than 25 years now, because we started it in June 1991 and we are now in September 2015, so we must be very clear that the role or a job of a government is of an enabler and not of a doer. Under such circumstances, what I feel that government job is more to show the direction. The direction in which the government has moved, certainly the direction is correct. We may argue, we may discuss, we may debate the speed at which the government should have said. One may say it has to be 100%, one may say 10%, but at least the direction is there. We would agree to ourselves that since 1991 to 2015, we have seen the governments of various political colors, but our economic policy has not taken a U-turn. The priorities might have changed according to the political color of a government, but the direction has remained changed. And if you would be in a better position to strengthen ourselves, considering the other competitors who are moving down. And if you look at it from that angle, I see or I feel that this particular government has initiated a right move. You made a mention of a GST, you made a mention of a land acquisition. You would appreciate that this is not the area on which only the central government can take a decision. Both these areas are having some sort of a role to be played by the state governments. And given the polity of our country and quality of our polity, these things are bound to be there. But the only impact which this particular delay, especially in GST, would be having would be more on the fiscals of a state government. Take an example of Maharashtra. We have already cancelled or we have already abolished a local tax, LBT. At that point of time, it was assumed that GST will be rolled into. Now we are in a void where LBT has been reduced or removed and GST has not yet been introduced. The time it will take to really introduce and implement GST, till that time, certainly the state government finances would be under stress. The state government finances are always balanced by ways and means advances of Reserve Bank of India or having recourse to the central government finances. And the nature of policies and implementational initiatives which this government or the earlier government has taken presupposes certain major contribution, not only by way of administration, but by way of financial commitment as well, whether it is agriculture, whether it is education, whether it is health, whether it is road infrastructure. Under such circumstances, this would certainly have an impact. So taking a continuation from my reply to our earlier question, if at all our government infrastructure or our GDP growth rate is going to slow down, it would be more because of our internal local factors than the impact of a global factor. One political signal they have given yesterday as far as GST is concerned, that a monsoon session of parliament, they have said that they are not going to reconvey, they are not going to have a special session. It would certainly have its political impact. But barring the political impact, if the process of a consensus gets expedited because of this, we may see particular thing. Over here, we will have to have a look at our composition as far as our national economy is concerned. I personally feel when your GDP is dominated by a service sector to the extent of 54% of its composition, probably the GST and LBT would have a lesser impact. If it would have been industrial sector dominated growth, then the scenario would have been much worse. To that extent, we are not worse, number one. Number two, I do agree that FIIs have also withdrawn to a great extent from our country. But if you have a composition, if you look at a composition, you would see where that FII flow we are going globally. Over there, for one reason or the other, China has declared a financial war. Brazil is getting downgraded. So under such circumstances, among the BRICS country or among the G7 countries, even today, even at a lesser level, even at a lower level, our country happens to be the attractive destination for FIIs. And most importantly, let us be very clear, we can't ignore this fact that even today our country boasts of a comparatively good internal savings rate. So if we are able to rein in reality, not in statistics, in reality, the local inflation rates, even then our economy can sustain and consolidate. Only thing is we need a stable government and a stable policy.
Sir, after the announcement of the Make in India slogan, there has been some FDI investment like Foxconn, Xiaomi, Airbus. But do you think that enough has been done to ensure that this is not a mere slogan and is India is actually an attractive proposition for businesses to invest in and manufacture in India?
Yes, Make in India is a slogan as on date. It pains to say so, even then, yes, as on date it's a slogan. But a due credit has to be given that at least, as I said in my earlier deliberation, that the direction is very clear in which they want to move. Now it is up to industry to take it up. I can cite an example that even today there are scopes, and there were scopes even earlier before making this announcement and branding it as Make in India. So the question is not only on a part of a government to initiate something, equally it is on the part of the concerned entrepreneurs from that particular sector. You would appreciate that that process has started. Otherwise, the global brands like Microsoft or IBM would not have shifted their manufacturing base to our country. And when you are having a service sector domination and 10% of your younger working population in that sector, it does attract a particular thing. Aviation can be a good example for it. Pharma is another example for it. Hotels and tourism is another example for it. Medical prescriptions and transcriptions is another field of it. So I personally feel these things can start, which will immediately have an impact on the employment rate of our country. Certainly it would have an impact, a positive impact on our GDP growth rate. Over here, when we are saying whether such type of FDI would come into picture or not, whether it would make in India successful or not, we'll have to look at the other side of a coin as well. When we are expecting FDIs to come, there are two aspects to it. One, how much attractive I can make my country. That government policy decision is there. Equally, it is dependent on a fact how much other countries can pump in and in which stage they are. This factor just can't be ignored. But this factor, that is their internal domestic national economy, is not within my purview. Those factors are not within the jurisdiction of my purview. You would appreciate that who were my major FIIs in last 10 years, 15 years. Then you would agree that one of them was America. Today America is in a war to save its own economy, to reign its own supremacy, and that's why I said the war is between China and Germany. And war is not between China and America. America is trying to consolidate its own position. And as it is coming out just out of a recession in 2009, they are diverting their own funds over there, number one. Number two, when they are selling so heavily, they are having another monetization impact on our country as well. And that's why in my first question reply, I said that our country is fortunate to have a robust domestic saving rate. And fortunately, it is not dependent on the interest rate which government offers, but it is arising out of a habit which has been inculcated into my culture for centuries. If we are able to boast this and combine it with the local skills which we have, and we are able to brand our products accordingly, the Make in India would be successful. These initiatives would have to come more from the state governments. I can vouch for this. There are certain pragmatic state governments. In earlier question, I compared Greece with Bihar. You would appreciate that there are three different states which came into existence on the same day. Jharkhand was carved out of Bihar, Uttaranchal was carved out of Uttar Pradesh, and Chhattisgarh is carved out of Madhya Pradesh on the same day. Look at the status of these three states. Then you would realize what is the impact of a continuous and stable administration. Any industrial activity, any economic activity flourishes only when you have these kinds of the ingredients. Yes, finances are needed, but merely finance doesn't propel you to a high growth rate. Compare the industrial growth rate of Chhattisgarh vis-a-vis Jharkhand and vis-a-vis Uttaranchal. If you see the status of a mineral resources available, coal resources available, power resources available, Jharkhand is much richer than other countries. But Jharkhand is recording the lowest growth rate, at least among these three states, compared exactly to Chhattisgarh. Because of a sound administration, they know where they want, and it is coming out with marketing its own tribal traditional products along with the medical services. And certainly your growth rate is a composition of all these things. So we'll have to look at all these factors as well, which may sound and which are non-financial in nature, but they do have an impact. I take even why to compare other states. Take any state. You would realize that even within that state, certain geographical patterns do emerge. A particular sector may be good for sugarcane, but if you try to replicate that even within the state, but if that local conditions are not favorable, then you say, and that's why you are saying now that government is thinking of banning a sugarcane production in Marathwada. That clearly shows that unless and until you are able to connect your geographical advantages or disadvantages, as they say in a commercial geography theory of comparative advantage. This comparative advantage need not be only in finance. It has to be in product, it has to be in transport. I can tell you how it happens. You would have realized that at least in last 1.5 years, maybe because of a fall in global crude prices, but yes, certainly petrol prices have gone down, diesel prices have gone down, aviation fuel prices have gone down. And that has the impact on inflation. If inflation is controlled and even then your income has not gone up, a disposable income goes up. And when a disposable income goes up because of my cultural habits, I do keep on investing, which gives a boost to industrial growth. But in order to complete this entire cycle, a period of 15 months is not a comparable period. I'm not saying to give them 15 years, but at least let us wait for another 10 months. You just see the impact. As soon as the monsoon revived, it's not a coincidence that my Sensex has revived. It doesn't mean that if it has rained today, I'm going to have a product at 3 o'clock by the time my day's trading ends. But that gives you a hope. And basically, a service sector economy is a hope-driven economy rather than an action-driven economy.
Sir, as an economist, what do you think are the 3 steps that the current policymakers can take to boost the Indian economy, which is independent of parliament?
Policies which can be taken by the government would be 3. And that's why you don't need a parliamentary approval. It is more an administrative nature. First and foremost, rationalizing the product. We have various outlays for a similar kind of a product, rationalize it. Number 1. Control the electricity and water wastages. And third and most importantly, give as much enabling provisions to the state governments who can decide their own industrial structure. All these are administrative decisions. That if you are able to take care of it, because if you see the expenditure pattern, it is more spent by the center but administered by the state governments. If we are able to have a rationalization over there, our deficits would go down, and all these are administrative in nature. It doesn't require a parliamentary approval. And if your state government deficits and their central government deficits go down, to that extent the government's dependence on the fund flow in my country will go down, and much more funds would be available to private. Interest rate will go down. It would have a positive impact on cost of production.